when you compare bike racing to suffering, I think it really does a huge injustice to the people that really are suffering. To me, suffering doesn't have an off switch. You don't have a choice. You're stuck with whatever it is, whether it's a health thing or if you live in Ukraine, like, yeah, those people are suffering. I'm not suffering out, with my multi-$1,000 bike and thousands of dollars worth of gear traipsing around in the wilderness. Like that's not suffering to me. That's, I'm choosing to do something hard.
This is Andrew Vontz, and you're listening to Choose the Hard Way, the show about how hard things build stronger humans who have more fun. Please rate the show 5 stars and subscribe wherever you listen or watch. And to support this work, become a paying subscriber at alwayshardway.substack.com. Special thanks to our title sponsor, blockchain.com, the most trusted name in crypto, with over $1 trillion in transactions to date. When I ride bikes, I ride Lauf because they're awesome and a lot of fun to ride. Check them out at laufcycles.com. My guest today is Art O'Connor. Art is a former professional mountain bike racer and the founder of Wukar Fit. He's a strength and conditioning coach for athletes and people of all ages and abilities, including pros like Keegan Swenson, Sofia Villafane, Chase Wark, and many others. He has been at this a minute. He competed in the first mountain bike world championships. In case you missed it, that was in Durango, Colorado in 1990. Today, Art is still racing as a cold weather ultra endurance fat bike specialist. He's completed the Iditarod Trail Invitational 350 and many other races with some hot finishes, including a second in the Fat Pursuit 200K. His philosophy is lift heavy, ride fast. I agree. Art famously completed the Abandon Your Family 500 Challenge and joined myself, Chase Wark, Spencer Martin, and Jonathan Kaplan for the AYF Hot Wash. You can find that episode in the archives. I launched One Real Voice to provide the training and narrative development senior executives need to thrive in the unscripted, open-ended communication formats like town halls, fireside chats, and yes, podcasts. If you're ready to be great, DM me at HardwayPod or email hello@onerealvoice.com. You can find Art on Instagram at Wukar Fit, and his training programs are available there and at wukarfit.com.
I raced the first Worlds in Durango. I was on the Sovi Head Shock team with Tom Danielson, who I didn't know at the time. I knew he was on the team and had heard his name, but like I never actually met him while I was on the team. It was a big team. It wasn't like in a very exclusive team, but
wow.
But yeah,
and Sobi Head Shock, that was a storied outfit. What year was this?
This would have been late 90s, like 97 through like 2000. I was with Head Shock.
Okay. And at that time, what are we talking about? We're talking about what, mid to high 6 figures for a professional mountain bike racer?
Yeah, I think I got a couple of free jackets and a free frame, bike and frame. That was, yeah, I never made any money I had a professional license, but I was far from a pro.
Right. That was a wild time though, because during that exact period of time, I was living in Southern California. I was getting my MFA in creative writing, and I was working at the world's most down market fly-by-night cycling publication, which is called Mountain Biking, which later became Decline and then Peloton. And I remember going up to Sea Otter as well as Big Bear, Mammoth, when these were big stops on the Norba circuit. So at that time, we're talking Cadell Evans, Steve Larson. Did you ever run the Steve Larson tires that were like 1.5s?
I did. Not very successfully, but I tried them. Yeah, I mean, I've got some story. Like I have a story of like how I almost got on track and they chose Travis Brown instead of me.
Let's hear that story. What happened?
Good move in hindsight for them. Well, I was riding for just a local shop here, and our local Trek rep kind of hooked me up with Trek, and so me and a couple of guys got some bikes and things. And, this was early days, like 1989. So the sport was pretty young, and they were just looking for people. And I had a good nationals that year. I got invited to a talent ID camp at the Olympic Training Center, and Travis did as well. He didn't go because he was skiing collegiately at the time. But anyway, Trek was starting to put together like their first real factory team. So they'd already signed Don Myra, and I can't remember who the girl was, but anyway, it was they had one more spot for guys, and my connection at Trek was like, it's between you and Travis Brown. And this was back in Moab used to have a big spring mountain bike race, and like they're going to base it on the results of Moab. It's going to be kind of the tiebreaker. And Travis already, he had beaten, like I'd raced against Travis a bunch of times and I'd never beaten him. He was always the better athlete, but at the Moab race, he of course ended up beating me and became what he became. And, I went on to win a few industrial park crits. That was kind of my trajectory.
I feel like we're really glossing over the heart of this. What went down during the race? And at that time, are we talking a point to point? Was this a massive loop?
It was one loop. It was out by the Gemini Bridges area, and I started hard. I led for, the first half a lap or so, and was, giving it my all. And I think I'm trying to remember I think Ned won and Travis was second. And of all people, Bob Roll was third and I was fourth.
Yeah, because what did Bob ride for Merlin after he left? It wasn't the World Tour. After he left 7-Eleven, he was racing.
He was racing in a Z jersey then.
Right.
This was really early days for him. And then he rode for like ProFlex, and I think he rode one of those Allsop things for a while. Remember the Allsop beams?
Yes.
Like he had a pretty colorful career in terms of like bike choices and teams that he rode for.
Yeah, because we had Bob Roll, and then Lamond, I think for one season, showed up and tried to race mountain bikes, maybe 93, 94?
Yeah, Lamond won Schwamigan a couple of times, if I remember correctly. And then who was, oh God, there was another guy that was on like Zed or like on the trip that was pretty good for a couple of years and then dropped off, totally blanking on his name. Paul Willerton.
Oh yeah. Paul Willerton.
Yeah. He got like fourth at Worlds when they were in Vail. And then that was kind of, so yeah, I was kind of the Forrest Gump of that era. Like I was there for a lot of that stuff.
Sure.
But not, not at the forefront of it, but
yeah,
I got to race Worlds with, at the first Durango Worlds, and we had this probably shouldn't go on there, but we had
if I recall correctly, which I may not, was this the year that Frischknecht wrecked on the bike path? No, that was in Vail, which would have been the next year. Yeah. Was that the next year?
No, that was like, I want to say like 98.
Wow. Wow. Right. And then there were
two Worlds at Vails. At Vail, right. There was the one that Tinker almost won, and then that Henrik Journeys won,
right? And
then Roland Green won one year at Vail as well, if I remember right.
Roland Green, I would like, maybe I just immediately think, where is Roland Green now? I've wondered this for a long time.
From what I heard, he's in Vancouver somewhere, and I think he has a construction business, if I remember correctly, but I don't know if can quote me on that. But I don't think he has much to do with cycling anymore.
Right. Inspired an entire generation of cross-country racers to use athletic tape on their wrists. I don't know if you remember. That was...
I do. Like he broke his wrist at the Tour of Georgia, if I remember right.
Yeah, that was kind of his signature look. It was almost like a kid wearing receiver gloves or something. That was quite an era in mountain biking. And you mentioned Don Myra. When I was racing Elite Masters cyclocross out in the Bay Area, we just had this cavalcade of former world and national champions who would be in every field I entered. So we had Justin Robinson, who he's probably still winning or nearly winning. all of
Probably.
those races. And at Nats as well, always a factor in the single speed national championship, even though Kerry Werner is now dominating. And Kerry, of course, has announced his retirement, which means he'll be moving into age group racing and winning those age group Masters Nats now. But we would have Justin Robinson and then, of course, Don Myra. And I remember the first time I showed up and I was like, that's Don Myra, who I saw on many Velo News covers as a young person. And suddenly there I was racing him. And Art, he has not gotten much slower.
It's what I hear. I had never raced against him as a Masters, but as a pro, he came out and did a couple of races here in Utah because I went to school with his younger brother, Gary. So I knew Gary very well, and
Right.
Got to meet Don through Gary, but I never raced him head to head as a Masters. The guy I did race and got second at Nationals to, who I think it was his only Masters race ever, was Dale Knapp in Providence in 2005. Dale, I got a great start. It was in the middle of a blizzard, and I led for like 6 laps. Unfortunately, it was 7 laps. So he led on the lap that was important.
Hey, you won those 6 laps though, and nobody can take that away from you.
Exactly.
It's occurring to me now that, Ned Overend, really a pace setter with his mustache back in the day, right?
Right? Who would have known? And now Ned doesn't have a mustache.
I mean, I'm surprised. If you don't have a mustache, you're basically not alive anymore. If you are a Masters gravel racer, really kind of that Frank Poncherello, John Baker, California Highway Patrol look. Although neither of them, of course, had mustaches, but that's what I often think of when I think of the dominant facial hair aesthetic in gravel now, right?
You're leaving Watts on the table if you don't have a mustache. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. And you mentioned Travis Brown, who I feel was the pace setter for his era for both facial hair and then, of course, the gauge earrings. I can't help but wonder when you were out on that loop in the Gemini Bridges area, if you didn't hear his gauge earrings, almost like the bottles in Warriors when they're clinking the bottles together as he approached you.
Yeah, it was kind of the Jaws theme, but with stainless steel. You could hear him clanging behind me, and then he passed me, and I never saw him again. So, but yeah, and Travis is a gentleman and a scholar in all regards. I don't know him super well, but he's always been super cool to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Same with Don. Don's always, he doesn't know who I am probably, but when I've interacted with him at the races, always very cordial, super nice guy, and extremely fast. So you start out young and fast. You're the Forrest Gump of your era. You're everywhere. Fast forward, suddenly it's, you're out there with the wolves in the darkness and the cold. How do you end up there?
Yeah, so the fat bike thing was kind of something I never saw myself doing. I wasn't interested in long distance stuff at all when I was quote unquote fast. Like my kind of rule was I'm not going to race for longer than my average night's sleep. And that held true for a very long time. So like I never did Leadville, never done Lodija, which is a big deal around here. But I got a fat bike in like 2015-ish or so. A good friend of mine still is the Cannondale rep here, and he got us the first Cannondale lefty fat bikes, and did a couple of local races. And then I heard about this thing up in Idaho called the Fat Pursuit, which is put on by Jay Peterbury, who's like one of the most legendary bike pack and ultra endurance guys on the planet at this point. But Jay puts this race on, and they had a 50K version, and at the time they also had a 200 mile and a 200 kilometer version. I did the year I went, it was 35 below at the start, and I had no idea what I was doing. Didn't have proper gear, but I was staying in a place with some guys who did. So like somebody lent me their pogies because I was just going to go out there with gloves, and they're like, no, you can't do that. You're going to lose your fingers. So I kind of had a bunch of borrowed gear for that kind of cold, which I'd never ridden in. I grew up in Maine, so I've seen that kind of cold before. But did that race, finished it, and got like, I think I was third or fourth at that. But I was really impressed with myself in that I finished it and didn't like lose any fingers or toes or the end of my nose due to frostbite. So I kind of got, but I finished, and like all these hard things you finish, like never again. This was too hard. I can't, like, what kind of psycho does the 200 mile or the 200K? Like, that's never going to happen for me. And like all things that, never say never. I went back the next year, did the 50K again, and got about the same result. And just started thinking about maybe I could try this 200K. So I signed up for the 200K the following year. And they have a gear check at this race. Like, you have to have, a sleeping bag, a bivvy, ability to boil water. There's actually a water boil test in the 200K that randomly throughout the course, Jay will have a stop where you have to melt snow and bring it to boil just to prove that you can use your equipment. So I showed up at this, like, with, went out and bought all this new stuff. I had a brand new sleeping bag, new bivvy. Like, I had the tags on this stuff, like, at the start of the race. Basically, I'd never used any of it. Started off, and it was pretty soft going at first. It was snowing that day pretty hard. And Kurt Refsnyder, who you may or may not know, just, takes off. Alex Howes is on his wheel. And then a couple other guys go, and I'm like, I can't go that fast. So I'm just like, I kind of settle in, and we're getting deeper into the race, and I start catching people. And finally, I catch Alex Howes. And there's a story there as to why I caught Alex Howes. It's not because I was fitter or faster than him, but catch
What
Alex
happened?
Howes and like, he should, like, it was his first event too. And he had been training in Boulder, like on groom paths, and was using too narrow tires, basically, and too much
So we
air
are
pressure.
going to talk about tire width, I guess.
A little bit, yeah. A little bit. But mostly he was running too much pressure. Like, he would, he just didn't have the experience in those conditions. Cause, like, in any other bike race, you could time the gap between me and Alex Howes with a calendar. But, in this certain really specific situation, he was unprepared and unexperienced, and I was able to use, my experience to my advantage. So suddenly I find myself in second place of this race, and we're about 8 hours in, and it's starting to get dark, and it's really starting to come down snow-wise. But because I was so unprepared, like, my batteries had died in my lights at this point. We haven't even made it to the first checkpoint. My GPS is gone. It's like whiteout snow. We get to the checkpoint. I come in second. Alex is right behind me and a couple other dudes. We all kind of came in together, actually, at that point. And I pulled the plug because I'm like, at this point, we still had to go up over this mountain called Two Top, which tops out at about, I think it's about 9,000 feet or something like that. But like, it's, 10 o'clock at night at this point. It's like whiteout snow. I don't have a GPS. I have one functioning light with one set of spare batteries. And I just kind of chickened out. Like, I had never slept in the snow before. I hadn't, like I said, I hadn't used any of my gear. So I pulled the plug on that.
Let's hit pause here for a second, because I have no idea. What are the trail conditions like? Is there a trail at all when you're doing an event like this? And is it orienteering, or do you have a GPX route that you're following?
You have a GPX route. We're on snowmobile trails. Usually in a good year, they're groomed and it's relatively easy going for a lot of the course. There's some sections that don't get as much snowmobile traffic and it's a little bit slower. This year, between the start of the race and the finish, they got almost 2.5 feet of snow during the race. So it was really coming down.
Did you have to push your bike? Was it that bad?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Up until, I definitely would have been you're pushing your bike up Two Top, even in good conditions, because it's steep enough that you can't get up it with a loaded, but even in the summer he has a race on the same course, or used to have a race on the same course in the summer. It's steep enough that even on a gravel bike, you're pushing in parts of it.
How cold was it the day you did this?
That year, it wasn't that cold. It was like 10 degrees.
Okay. But the first year you did it, you did the 50K, and you mentioned
35.
Okay, and you mentioned it was 35 below zero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Fahrenheit.
even in a race that's that short, I think the coldest I've experienced for a prolonged outdoor activity was in Lapland. I was outside for a few hours and it was -50 Fahrenheit. And I ended up getting some frostbite on my face just from having a tiny amount of skin exposed.
Yeah.
I also found it to be extremely difficult to find that Goldilocks temperature between I'm totally overheating because you have to have so many layers on versus man, I'm freezing and I'm about to die. How do you navigate that when you're doing heavy physical activity like you are when you're out there doing this race?
Yeah, weirdly enough, on the bike, it's more a question like you're trying to keep from sweating rather than to keep from shivering. Like it's
Okay.
more about heat management and moisture management than anything else. An event like Fat Pursuit, it's not as big of a deal because if you're at the pointy end of things, you're not going to bivy and you're not going to sleep. So you're just even if you wet out your clothes from sweat, you're just going to keep going.
Is that the term, wetting out?
Yeah, yeah. If you
Okay.
wet out, you just keep going.
So you're trying to stay at the optimal temperature or having enough ventilation so that you don't saturate your layers. Is that the deal?
Correct. Yeah, because like in a multi-day event like Iditarod, the last thing you want to do is get to the end of your day, which for me is usually about 15 hours, and you're completely soaked, and now you've got to get in a sleeping bag and change out your clothes or do whatever when it's below zero. You want to avoid that at all costs. Like getting wet is what gets you in trouble in really cold situations.
Have you had that experience?
I have never gotten to the point where I was like hypothermic. Like I've been pretty lucky with my fat bike expeditions or races or whatever you want to call them, and that like I tend to run really hot, so it's like shocking how light I dress for these things. Like typically, I'll have like a soft shell pant with no long underwear. I'm good to down to about 20 below with no long underwear with the pants that I have, and upper body I'll have like a mesh base layer and like a long sleeve merino and then like a merino jacket with like a windstopper vest on the front. And same thing, I'm good to down to about 20 below with that setup.
Do you
And
run
then
bibs?
No.
So no bike shorts or anything. You're just
No, but I wear bikes, just not
you
bibs.
wear bike shorts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I luckily have not had any GI issues in these long races, but it's really, really common. And you don't want to have to be peeling off layers to get your bibs off. Like the first year I did Iditarod, or no, the second year I did Iditarod, there was a guy, an Alaskan there who should have known better, but thought he was fast enough that it wouldn't be an issue. But anyway, he started having some major GI issues like day one and was wearing bibs and was like every half hour having to stop and take care of business. And by the time he had gotten to the halfway point, like he had what I can only imagine was a crime scene going on in his pants. Like this guy was insane. Like I have never seen anybody so uncomfortable and in so much pain in my life, like self-inflicted. like he was in a really, really bad way because he's like every time, and finally he just stopped putting the bibs on, and it was to the point where he eventually had to pull out of the race because it had gotten so bad.
When you're doing these races, do you have a transponder such that you can activate emergency rescue, or are you on your own?
No, well, a little bit of both. So a race like Fat Pursuit, you're never that far away from help. Everybody has some kind of transponder of some sort. Some of them, most of them, if you rent one from the race, for example, all it does is ping your location for the race organizers to see where you are. You can't send a message out. You can't send an SOS out. Most people have like a Garmin InReach or like a Spot that they can, communicate with the outside world with. So in Idaho at Fat Pursuit, if you send that message out, and I have a friend who has a cabin basically on the trail, and so and he races the race with me, but he has adult children that are usually there with us with snowmobiles. And so like you have cell coverage almost everywhere on that course. So I can just send a text message, and the furthest point away is about an hour for them to get there on a snowmobile to get you out. So you go into that race with a little more confidence that you can push it a little bit harder and kind of take some risks. And if it really goes sideways, you can get out of there pretty quickly. Alaska, whole other deal. At the rider meeting, as a rookie, they scare the living hell out of you. Like, this is Alaska, expect to self-rescue. Even if you push the oh shit button, it could be several days before anybody gets to you because, it's Alaska. The weather can be ridiculous. So you're expected to be able to take care of yourself for as long as it takes for somebody to get to you or to get yourself out. And I kind of experienced that my second time up to Alaska. I had a pretty gnarly back injury on the third day and ended up having to push my bike for almost 14 hours straight to get to an extraction point.
What happened to your back?
I have a herniated L4, L5 that I've had since I'm 19. Most of the time it's pretty good. I don't have a problem with it. This particular one. So, all right, I'll tell you that. So this was 2 years ago.
Hey, that's why we're here. Let's hear it all. Yeah.
There's an infamous section of the race called the Happy Steps, which the first part of it, you're going down these little drops that are so steep that you really can't, you could ride them, but you're pretty remote at this point. It's just not worth it. If you ride it, fine. But if you crash, you're going to have a 70-pound bike land on you probably because you're going to go over the bars. So
how far into the race are you at this point?
That was first day. That was the third day.
Third day, and in general, and it's a 350-mile race, correct?
Yeah.
And how many?
Yes. Yeah. Third day. Second day. Third day.
How many days does it typically take to complete?
For me, just under 5. Like, I'm usually a 4.5 day kind of person. For the winners, they're like 2 to 3 days. Like, the guys that win Iditarod don't stop. They don't stop to sleep. They go straight through. I don't do the sleep deprivation thing at this stage in my athletic career, such as it is. So I usually stop for like 4 to 6 hours a night and we'll sleep. But on this day, so there's a big push from the checkpoint called, the Shell Lake checkpoint to Puntilla Lodge. It's a pretty big push and there's a lot of elevation that day. And the Happy Steps are about halfway through this day. And so you go down these Happy Steps, which the technique is most people will get off their bike and kind of hold it up and slide down on their butt. It's that steep. And then you come out on this river, and then it's probably about 800 meters of about a 20% grade that you have to get your bike and yourself up over. And the first year I did it, they were doing some kind of mining or logging operation out there. And it was literally like a road that they had taken snowcats up, and like, it was probably 40 feet wide and it was pretty good traction. You could, you're still pushing your bike because it's super steep. This particular year, they had gotten probably like 3 or 4 feet of snow the week prior to the race. And that mining operation or lumber or whatever they were doing had wrapped up. So there was only a single snowmobile track up this thing. And it's probably 3.5 feet on either side of snow. And then there's a track in the middle. So I'm about halfway up this thing, pushing my bike up it. And my back was kind of tweaky already at that point. Cause like pushing's the work, like riding the bike doesn't hurt my back at all. It's pushing a 70-pound bike doesn't do a favor to anybody's back. But about halfway up, and this supply train of snowmobiles starts coming down. And so like, I have nowhere to go. They can't stop. So I had to grab my bike, lift it up over my head and go to Chuck. And that's when, I herniated it was already herniated, but that's when it started presenting. And I'm in some of the worst pain I've ever been in my life. I can barely walk. They go past and I get my bike and I make it to the top of this thing. And it was pretty much a walk from there to to the next lodge where I could, and then I had to, even then, like I wasn't in any, like I got there, I was fine, but like I knew my race was over. Because the trail was only getting worse from there. Like if it had been a situation where I knew I could ride from there to the finish, I probably would have kept going. But I knew there was like the next day was going to be probably a full day of pushing my bike up Rainy Pass, which is the high point of the race where you cross the Alaska Range. So I knew I didn't have that in me. So even then I get there and I'm like trying to arrange for a flight out of there. And it was 3 days before they could get in because the wind was so bad and the weather was so bad. So expect to self-rescue, I guess is the theme there.
Yeah, had to self-rescue. There's so much in that story. As you get deeper and deeper into doing these ultra events, what is the physical experience like of competing, and what's the level of effort as you're going through this? It's a very long endurance effort, but you're also, you're doing a sled push, it sounds like, for a very long period of time. So what's the actual fitness profile?
I mean, fitness is certainly, you certainly have to have a baseline of fitness for these things, but it's really more, it's a mental exercise as much as probably more than anything. Like, yeah, you have to, you're not going to show up there 300 pounds overweight and expect to have a decent result or even to finish in the time cut off. But I was, with all these ultras, like I'm always surprised at the body types and sizes and shapes that you see of people that are, pretty accomplished, that if you saw them in street clothes, you wouldn't think they're an athlete of any sort, but they have the mindset and that ability to just keep going forward and to adapt to things as they happen without getting in like this negative death spiral. And that's what every ultra event is like. And, you just keep telling yourself, like, during the good times, you try to savor it and, and really enjoy the fact that you're feeling good, because, at some point that's going to change and you're going to feel like absolute garbage. And all you're going to want to do is stop and drop out. But during those garbage times, you just have to keep the mindset of, this is going to get better. I'm going to feel better. And usually you can eat your way out of a lot of these situations. Usually when it starts going really bad, it's because you've gotten behind on your calories, your hydration. So in those situations, for me anyway, the best move is to stop and eat a ton of food, like get my stove out, make a hot meal, and take the time. You'll make up way more time by refueling yourself and feeling better for the next 8 hours than if you just slog through and don't address it.
I was thinking about this mental factor of ultra events recently when I was down in Tucson, and I had a really terrible night of sleep, and we were climbing Mount Lemmon, which is, it's a pretty long climb, at least for me, coming from Maine, where we have a lot of rolling terrain, and most of my, actually all of my training for the 4 months before going to Tucson was in a garage. So I was just riding up virtual mountains. So we're on Mount Lemmon. I feel terrible. Nonetheless, there I am. I'm going to give what I have that day. And 2 hours into it, I kept thinking, okay, I've got to be close to the top. It just kept going and going. My body did not feel good at all. And I had kind of passed the point of it simply being uncomfortable, which is totally fine. I was getting more into the territory of I'm potentially injuring myself with some things I had going on in my body. And the way to end this experience was to get to where I needed to go.
Yeah.
And at the same time, that day we see Lael Wilcox going up the mountain. And as I was having this experience, I was thinking about, if this were happening and I were in the middle of crossing the United States or whatever, going point to point from the Arctic Circle to Tierra del Fuego or whatever Lael does, like, what would this be? This would just be like 1 second relatively of that experience. Having been in these multi-day ultra experiences, has it impacted at all your experience of day-to-day life, or does your capacity to move through those moments only exist when you're on a bicycle or pushing one.
No, for me and for most of the people that I do these events with, and we talk about this stuff a lot, there's a lot of carryover to day-to-day life. Uh, usually the only way out is forward for any situation. And for me, I always like to remind myself that I put myself in this situation. And so like we could do a whole podcast on my dislike of suffer culture because I think it's just ridiculous.
Let's hear about it. I agree with you. Yeah, this is an elective thing we do because we have extreme privilege to have this really nice equipment and we have time to go do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like my first trip to Alaska, was I uncomfortable at times? Absolutely. But like all I had to do was just look around and like look at where you are and look at how you got here. Like how many people get to experience the Alaskan wilderness in this way in the winter? Like to be out in the middle of absolute nowhere under your own power, knowing that you have to get yourself out of this it really is. It's a privilege. Like I didn't like suffering. Like there's, when you compare bike racing to suffering, I think it really does a huge injustice to the people that really are suffering. Like to me, suffering doesn't have an off switch. Like you don't have a choice. You're stuck with whatever it is, whether it's a health thing or, if you live in Ukraine, yeah, those people are suffering. I'm not suffering out, with my multi-$1,000 bike and thousands of dollars worth of gear traipsing around in the wilderness. Like that's not suffering to me. That's, I'm choosing to do something hard. I mean, who knew? We're on the Hard Way podcast, but but there's so much to be learned from that because you really learn who you really are in those situations where, you're super uncomfortable for whatever reason. You have hours and hours to go before you can stop. And like this summer, like we moved our gym, we had to remodel a new, so my entire summer was going and training people in the morning, going to the new space and working on the remodel with my partner. And it sucked like that. It really did suck. But again, like, I always had to remind myself like, okay, you're here because you want to be here. And you're going to get some value out of this. You're not suffering, you're building a business and you're going to be moving into this new, beautiful building. And yeah, it sucks to be swinging a hammer and demoing asbestos walls when it's 100 degrees outside. But, I put myself in that situation. I choose to be there. I mean, we talked a little bit off air and I don't really want to get into it here, but like, I have a family member that's going through a major health, terminal health event. That's suffering. Like there's no options there. They have to deal with what they have to deal with. They don't get to opt out of it. When I'm doing an ultra distance event, at any point, I can just say, you know what, this sucks. I'm going to go home. And I can do that. That's not suffering to me if you have that option.
When you're thinking about these experiences or adventures that you're going to have with cycling, and we're definitely going to talk about strength training as well, what are the characteristics you're looking for? And I guess the context I will offer is that in so much of endurance sports, it feels like there is a very prescriptive standard framework for how people think about approaching adventure or competition. And I'm going to do these bucket list events, whether it's an Ironman, I'm going to try to qualify for the Boston Marathon, I'm going to do Unbound. And there also are people who kind of freestyle it and go bike packing or whatever. But there is very much kind of a templatized approach a lot of people, including myself at times, have taken to this. And I think I'm asking this because this is going to blow your mind. I continue to age and my mental capacity to push my body far beyond what it is healthy to do continues to exist. And my body is continually telling me, stop doing this through things like going into AFib when competing, or most recently traveling back from Tucson from sitting for 10 hours in a day. I had a hip injury that kept me off my bike for a full week or really unable to do anything. That then makes me start to think about, okay, what other things might I want to experience while I can express my physical capacity in this way? So what informs how you think about what you select?
You know, I'm not a big fan of doing the same event over and over. Other than I feel like I have unfinished business in Alaska. I would someday like to be able to do the full race to Nome. I've only done the 350-mile version. I haven't done the 1,000. So that's the only one that I keep finding myself. And Fat Pursuit. Fat Pursuit always has a special place in my heart because that was what got me started. But it's interesting, like I had the experience this year at Fat Pursuit of pulling out because of my back, not because it had gotten to the point that I was incapable of moving, but because of the medical situation in my family right now. I was starting to do the math of if I really throw my back out the way it can go out and I'm incapacitated for the next 4 weeks, now I'm putting that burden on people in my family to have to take care of me as well as taking care of, the situation that we have now. And that's, cycling and sport is a pretty selfish pursuit in general. And that was really the first experience for me where I really had to think about how my actions impacted others. I mean, I don't have children, and but I'm sure there's a shift that happens when you have a child where your risk tolerance and your risk calculus really changes because, you have something more important than yourself to think of.
Well, that's why I drive down Mount Lemmon. I climb to the top and get in a car.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, I used to be, I lived in LA. I'd climb to the top of Mount Wilson, which is about, I think it's 6,000 plus feet above sea level. And then I'd, go downhill at 40 or 50 miles an hour for however long that took to get back down. Now, you know what? I don't really care. I don't need to be fast. I don't care if I go down a mountain fast. I'm not doing the world tour. I just had Jens Vogt on the podcast who talked about what happened after he had that crash in the tour in, I believe, 2011, which totally adjusted his risk appetite for things like that. And for you, with all of that in mind, what's in front of you that you find yourself you continue to be drawn towards, that you will take the risk for?
Again, it's pretty, like, Alaska is certainly one. I really want to do Tour Divide at some point. Hoping to do it this summer. That it probably won't happen this summer. I'd like to do the Triple Crown actually in a single year.
What is the Triple Crown?
The Triple Crown of bike packing in America is Tour Divide, Colorado Trail, and Arizona Trail Race in the same year. So those are kind of the, they all present unique challenges. Tour Divide, obviously the length of it, you're out there, for me, it's probably going to be 20 to 25 days versus the fast people, it's going to be like 12 to 15 days. Colorado Trail, weather is a big factor because it's in August, so you get pretty much gonna get rained on every afternoon, and in some you're in some places you're caught above tree line when those things come in, so you have to. There's a lot of kind of planning that goes into that, and also on the fly decisions of, do I want to take the chance of being this exposed during this time above tree line, or is it better to kind of hole up here and wait for the storm that we know is coming to happen, and then crossing it later. Arizona Trail presents a lot of, it's in the fall, but it's Arizona. It's not uncommon for it to be well over 100 degrees for a large portion of that. But then as you start getting north, when you get up around in the Kaibab, then it's like 20 degrees at night. And then you also have to finish the race by hiking across the Grand Canyon with your bike on your back because your wheels aren't allowed to touch the ground in Grand Canyon National Park. So there's a lot. So they all present unique challenges, and it's Arizona Trail for me would certainly be the hardest because my back issues, hiking across the Grand Canyon with all my crap on my back, my back kind of goes into spasm just thinking about it. But those are
Yeah.
kind of the big ones. Like, I'm going to do a race called the Stagecoach 400 in April. It's a 400-mile route that starts and finishes in Idlewild, California,
Oh,
goes all the way
beautiful.
down to
Yeah.
Del Mar and San Diego. And I'm trying to find stuff that are just intriguing to me in terms of like what I'm going to see terrain wise at this point. Like, I'm not at the pointy end of these things anymore. I don't want to be necessarily, because I know what it takes. I'm not willing to do sleep deprivation. And I'm also, I'm just not that fast anymore. I'm almost, I'll be 60 this summer. So it's taken a long time to get there, but I'm finally comfortable with the fact that I'm not, a super competitive athlete anymore. I'm out there for different reasons.
Yeah. I don't want to put you on the spot or make you feel truly uncomfortable, Art. I have to say, though, for being nearly 60, you look damn good.
Appreciate that. Clean living or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Thanks,
And
mom and dad.
when events are this long, for people who follow competitive gravel cycling and world tour cycling, we know that gravel cyclists tend to do 2 to 3 times the hours of world tour athletes for whatever reason.
Mhm.
If you're going out to do a race that's 400 miles, 1,000 miles that might last a full week with minimal sleep, are you training 10, 12 hours a day? How can you actually have sufficient base to go do that?
I'm not. I know the people that are doing well, they are doing stuff like that. They're doing a lot of long days, but I'm well into my master's years and I have a business to run and I have family obligations like most people. So, I just have to make the best. Like the first time I did Fat Pursuit, I did most of my training on, indoors, on Trainer. I was actually on the, Trainer Road had their, what is it? Some kind of everyday athlete podcast. And they talked to me about how I prepared for an ultra by just riding indoors. And, I was doing like 8 to 10 hours a week. And yeah, you can. So I guess the differentiation you need to make is, are you going there to win and be competitive, or are you going just for the experience? If you're going just for the experience, you can do that on, an 8-hour week, 12-hour week. But if you want to be at the pointy end of things, yeah, you probably need to be doing, a lot of these back-to-back hard days.
And if we were to compare the effort of going out and being a completer versus being a competitor, would it be fair to say that the completer is probably targeting at staying in low to mid zone 2 max for most of the event, and at the pointy end, maybe they're going into tempo? Is that about how it works out?
Hard to, probably not actually. I think just the fast people, their zone 1 is just faster than my zone 1.
Yeah.
You're out there for so long. Like, I don't think, from a physiology standpoint, I don't think anybody can ride in like zone 3 or 4 for 15 hours a day. No matter how you train, day after day. You may be able to do it for, obviously
Yeah.
they do that at something like Unbound, but that's a 1-day effort.
Yeah. That's just immediately, not that this is a knock on him or his approach, but it makes me immediately think of when Ted King did Tour Divide. He did go out quite hot and he had rhabdo, I think, after 2 days, just like, an early 2000s CrossFit athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Uncle Pukey just pulled him right out of the race. And maybe that's a good bridge over to the world of strength training. And Art, you have Wukar Fit. You're a legend in the strength and conditioning space for cyclists, a pioneer. And I was thinking about this. What's in the water out there? There's you, early days, and kind of like peak Jim Jones, Mark Twight in Utah. And then, of course, some of Dan John's finest work, other than the Coyote Point Kettlebell Club, also during his time in Utah. This is almost like Einstein and Newton meeting at a bar. Did the three of you ever converge at all?
Yeah. Mark actually rode on my team for a while. I used to have a team called Church of the Big Ring here, and Mark was a member of that. And I went through I am a Jim Jones certified instructor. I went through the whole process there, and I owe a lot to Jim Jones and Mark for the work that they've done. Like, like anybody, like I'm standing on the backs of giants to get where I'm at. Dan John, I've talked to him several times. He was involved in Jim Jones he's been at a lot of the seminars that I've been at and taught at for Jim Jones. So yeah, it's been, kind of, again, Forrest Gump. I'm in the right place at the right time and meet the right people to kind of get to the places that I've gone. And I think I think if you talk to any successful athlete or coach, they probably have a similar story in that they were, right place, right time, around the right people. And they've made the most of the opportunities that they had.
In art, when I think about strength and conditioning for myself at this phase of my life, and it's been a part of my life since probably 1993. Mm-hmm. And I've been lucky to work, particularly during my time at TRX and before that, just getting to spend time with really, I think, some of the greatest minds in the world in the domains of just high performance, human performance, strength and conditioning. And the way I think about it now is so radically different than 5 years ago and even 10 years ago. And for me, it's about what is the lowest friction way for me to get a sufficient dose such that I'm less prone to being injured and I'm not injuring myself while training, because I believe you should never injure yourself when training. And I think back even a couple of years or even now, my propensity to get injured just by pushing it, it's one extra rep. Or it's funny, you mentioned the nature of your injury in Alaska. And I was thinking, yeah, like rotational spinal load, right? Mm-hmm. It's like one of the number one ways I've injured myself throughout my athletic career. And you, of course, work with some of the biggest names in professional off-road and road and gravel cycling. How do you think about the difference in programming for a population like me and you versus those elite athletes that you work with?
Yeah, it's pretty different in terms of, like people are shocked when I, like my local athletes, they're everybody wants to know what Keegan's doing, what's Sofia doing. And I show them the stuff that I send them. They're like, that's it? I'm like, well, for these guys, yeah, because, Keegan's doing 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week, pretty consistently throughout the year. He doesn't need, he can't spend 2 hours in the gym twice a week. His sessions are pretty quick. They're they're very simple. I don't throw a lot of weird movements at him. It's, squats, deadlifts, a pushing motion, a pulling motion in the upper body. And that's pretty much it. Whereas, because I know they're getting all of their conditioning needs met on the bike. For guys like you and me, where, we have careers and responsibilities, we have to make the most of the time that we have available to us. And we can't get the same sort of stimulus that they get on a bike because we just don't have the volume. So we have to kind of make that up through, going to the gym, having getting good sleep, good recovery routines. So I'll throw a little bit more conditioning type stuff at like my master's athletes and, people that aren't professionals. So, Keegan's never doing like, a circuit where he's just moving, for 45 minutes straight and keeping his heart rate super high. That's not what he needs. That's not what he wants. But, for guys like you or me, where, a 10-hour week is a big week for us, we can and should be doing some more conditioning stuff. Like, like one of my favorite tool recently is the ski erg. Formerly I do a lot of stuff on the rower, but for me, it's a different stimulus. Still working on my aerobic engine to a certain degree, but it's, I can get a lot done in a short period of time with that because it is a full body movement. Whereas, if I had 20 minutes to train, like let's say tomorrow, I only have 20 minutes to train. am I going to get on my bike for 20 minutes, or am I going to get on a rower or a skier or do a kettlebell circuit for those 20 minutes? For me, I'm going to do the gym stuff because I'm going to get, the cardio benefit of it, but I'm also going to get this, the strength stimulus that I'm looking for as well.
And the time that we spend on the bike, I feel just from a general health perspective is pretty horrible for our bodies. And I mean, that's part of what informs how I think about strength and conditioning. And I have a couple of theories that I'd love to run by you because you know way more about this than I do. As I've been playing with my programming over the past couple of the years, one of the things that I've really started to hone in on is I really like unilateral movements that, I don't know how I would describe this, that connect the upper and the lower body. So it's really thinking about something where there's a force on one side of the body that you have to counteract on the other side, and you have to do it not just side to side, but contralaterally through the entire body. So things like a kettlebell snatch, which I think previously I would think of as more of an explosive hip movement, I now think of as this is an anti-rotation exercise, and it's something that's improving the coordination between my upper and lower body, which I actually think is one of the most important things in life, so you don't get hurt when you do something like I have to throw a hay bale like into the chicken coop. And I think it actually has a massive benefit for cycling that people, they don't think about.
Yeah, no, in my gym, we do a lot of kind of weird, like farm boy strength stuff, like, carrying like sandbags, bear hug sandbag carries, throwing it up on your shoulder and walking, doing like a lunge to an overhead press, because you do a lot of that on the bike. Like think about like you're grinding up a super steep hill. What are you doing? You're pushing down, like say you're pushing down with your left leg, and now you're pulling super hard with your right arm, and there's a lot of core engagement there as well. So a lot of what we do in the gym, especially for not so much for my pros, but for the weekend warriors, is like I'm trying to give them what the bike is not giving them. So like, the last thing most of my masters riders need is more quad work. We're in a super quad dominant sport. So I wanted to hit their posterior chain pretty hard and kind of correct those imbalances, because, anytime you have a massive imbalance between one muscle group and another, that opens you up to overuse injuries, tearing tendons and ligaments and things like that, because there is such a huge imbalance. For a pro, that's a trade-off they're probably willing to make, in that they don't need to be super balanced because they're trying to perform in something very, very specific. And if you're a pro, you have a very limited time window in order to do that. So they don't really care about fixing their postural stuff necessarily during their career. They're just interested in moving their bike forward as fast as they can for as long as they can. But for the weekend warriors and the masters, like I just want you to be a well-rounded athlete. So yeah, certainly it's going to help you on the bike, but to your point, like, if your wife asks you to go mow the lawn or, bring in some wood to feed the stove, and you can't do that, you're not a very functional human being, or a very useful human being for that matter. So it really kind of depends on what your goals are. It's no secret that, at the top level of every sport, it's probably not that healthy. The workload that they do and the intensity that they do, from a health standpoint, it just doesn't make sense. But for the rest of us, as much as I hate to admit it, Red Bull is probably not going to call me tomorrow to ask me to, help Remco in the mountains, but my wife is probably going to ask me to shovel the driveway when it snows tonight. So that's what I try to program for my regular athletes. But, pros are a whole different game. And that's a mistake that I think a lot of people make, when they get involved in a sport and want to try to perform well, is they look at what the pros do, and then they try to do some watered down version of that. And it really doesn't work for most people. Like you're not going to get the results that they're going to get, because you're not doing the volume of work that they're doing on the bike. So it's just not going to work for you. You've got to fill in those gaps, with gym work and, the mobility work and, the self-care stuff.
Yeah. And to that point about people perhaps trying to emulate or just copy paste what professional athletes are doing, when I think more often than not, the population that's consuming a lot of this content, I'll just use an example. Let's talk about the content that Dylan Johnson puts out, which I really enjoy because I'm a total geek. I love reading about exercise physiology. I'm someone, I will go to prime sources. I will read papers, even though I can't do most of this stuff anymore. I love reading about it. I love reading about human performance and exercise physiology. And I've talked to Dylan about this and we've exchanged some messages, because sometimes he'll come out with something. I'm thinking about a few of his videos about strength training. And part of what I love about Dylan is he has a very strong and provocative point of view. And I think that's part of what makes him such an interesting personality in this space. Equally, he's very dogmatic with strength training, for example, about having a really maximal load and then taking very long rest periods between lifts, which I think completely makes sense if you're a professional athlete and your entire day is available to go train. Great. Like, I don't know, go do 3 to 5 reps, rest 5 minutes. Completely makes sense. I also have shared with them, hey, if a master's athlete were to do this, and I'm thinking of your back injury when you were 19, or myself, I have problems with both of my knees. I have a disc problem. I have shoulder problems. And I found it's way better for me if I stick to that maybe 70 to 80% load range, because that's going to give me plenty of stimulus. I'm not going to the Olympics. I'm not going to the world tour. And I just want to be able to go back inside and throw my daughter in the air without throwing my back out. But if I were to copy paste this, which, more or less it's like, hey, I'm going to do Wendler 531 and graft it on top of my cycling routine, which I could do when I was sub 40, no problem. I could sleep 3 hours and go like do 531 all day and then ride my bike 20 hours a week. If I did it today, I guarantee I'm going to have a disc problem. I'm going to blow out a hip. Just something's not going to go right. And I talked to a lot of people who, because the primary population, especially with gravel participating in these events, I would say it's predominantly people between 45 and 60 right now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't test 1 rep maxes with any of my athletes. Like, I've never had Keegan do a 1 rep test on anything. I have a pretty good idea of what he could do, deadlift wise and squat wise, just based on his, 3 rep and 5 rep numbers. But at the end of the day, I don't care what his max is, and he doesn't either. Like, there's no magic formula that says if you can deadlift this much, your FTP is going to be this. It doesn't work that way. And you also reach a point of diminishing returns where if you get much stronger than that, it's going to mean doing less stuff on the bike and more stuff in the gym. And, for a pro, that makes no sense at all. But on the flip side, for a master's athlete, again, like I don't really care what my max deadlift is. I'm generally working in that, 70% of my estimated 1 rep max range. And that's that's like the zone 2 of gym work. And that's where I think most people should be. Like, it's a hard enough stimulus that you're going to get the strength gains that you want. You're going to get a little bit of hypertrophy there, depending on the rep and rest schedules that you do. But you're going to get the mobility, the range of motion stuff if you're doing full range of motion, which you absolutely should be for everything. As an amateur, as a pro, maybe there's some strong arguments to doing quarter squats for a pro, but I think even there it's questionable. But it's just, making the most of the time that you have available to get the response that you want. And that's what I do with all of my athletes, is try to look at their situation and figure what's going to be the most bang for their buck when they come to the gym. And for most of us, yeah, it's going to be doing, working in that 70% range most of the time, because like it's not a big enough load that you're probably going to get hurt even if your form goes bad. But if you're trying to do a max deadlift and your form isn't 100% perfect, you're probably going to get hurt sooner rather than later doing that. And the risk reward ratio just isn't there. Like you mentioned this earlier, the number one rule in my gym is don't get hurt in the gym. Your cycling's a dangerous enough sport. If you're going to get hurt, hopefully you don't get hurt on the bike. But if you get hurt on the bike, we all know what we're getting into when we throw a leg over a bike. There's a chance every time we get on a bike, there's a chance we're going to crash and get hurt. You should never get hurt in the gym, ever, for any reason.
And ideally, you don't get hit by a train of snowmobiles going downhill.
Right? I did. That's that in a perfect world. Yes. And I didn't get hit. So I did get out of the way. But what's funny about that is like, if it hadn't have been a panic situation, I would have been able to lift that and place it properly off the side of the trail, because I would have taken the time to brace myself properly and do the move. But it was just such a in the moment thing. I was just trying to not get run over and ended up hurting my back doing it.
Yeah, exactly. You could have done the Valsava maneuver and really braced that core, but you didn't have time that time.
No.
Art, one more topic I want to hit on was strength training. Again, this is pretty specific. There's been a lot of debate in the last year about doing low cadence, high torque, seated work. How do you think about that?
Again, like at the pro level, I think let's
think about it for everybody. But yeah, let's start with pros.
All right, at the pro level, I think it's more important than for an amateur, because the volume that the pros are doing, they can get a lot of the stimulus that they need by being on the bike. And that's extremely specific. I mean, that's the most specific strength work that you can do on the bike, is that low cadence stuff. But if you look at like how much force you're actually putting on the pedals, it's not that much. Like 70 Newton meters ends up, if you do the math on that, it's like 70 pounds or so, like 30. It's shockingly low how much force you're putting on the pedal. Like if you're doing a body weight squat, you're putting out more Newton meters than you are grinding at 50 RPMs up a 10% grade. But like the reason I give my pros such low volume in the gym is because I know that they're getting the exact specific stimulus that they need on the bike by doing the low cadence stuff, and just by the sheer volume that they're doing. For an amateur athlete, I think your time on the bike is probably better spent doing other things than the low cadence stuff for most people. Like I do some low cadence stuff mostly because I find it fun, but the gym is for general strength. The bike is for the specific strength. And I think you kind of develop that specific strength even without the low cadence stuff. Just to, like, where I live, most of my rides, I'm going up a canyon. So, I'm going to spend 40 minutes climbing. So I'm getting kind of the response that I need for my needs and the level that I compete at. But, I think the mistake that a lot of people make when they look at pros training is everyone's looking for the hack or the one thing that's going to get them over the top. And like most of the stuff that the pros are doing, like they're trying to find that extra 0.5%, that extra 1%, because for them, it's really going to help. For me, if I just, stop drinking yerba mate, these energy drinks for a week, I'd lose 5 pounds and my performance would go up. I don't need, that 0.5% I'm going to gain by doing low cadence drills is going to be a lot harder to come by than if I just, optimize some other things, in my training or my performance.
The thing I've wondered with the popularity of this seated low cadence high torque work, when I think about what actual benefits does someone take away from this? Because I feel, even when I listen to world tour level strength and conditioning or high performance experts talk about it, it's always about, it's a specific adaptation to implied demands. This is the most bike specific strength work you can do. when I think about the actual benefits of it, I actually wonder if it's more that this is about hip stability, knee stability, ankle stability, and core anti-rotation. And then I think for a given unit of time, is there actually a safer and more effective way to do that in the gym? And then my mind goes to, well, yeah, it's probably something kettlebell snatches if you have the technical capacity to do it. If not, maybe it's a clean and press, because I think you're getting that same contralateral tension that you would generate while doing seated climbing like that. And then I just think about the factor that you highlighted, which is these are people that are spending 20 or 30 hours a week on a bike, and it's a novel and different way to go up a hill, and they need to they need to do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the reason it works, I think it works best for pros, is because if they're doing everything that they should be doing in the gym, like they hit a ceiling in the gym where, if they go past that, it's probably going to mean more specific time in the gym and less time on the bike. Whereas the amateurs, like, I'm nowhere near my strength potential. Like somebody like people like Keegan and Sofia, like they're probably butting up against like what they can do physically. The gap between what they can actually, like, their true limit and where they're at is a lot closer than mine is. Let's put it that way. So for me, my time is better spent just getting generally stronger in the gym versus getting that really specific stimulus of the low cadence stuff. For a pro, it makes sense for them to get that really specific low cadence stuff because they don't have the time or probably desire even to go in the gym and get a whole lot stronger than they already are. I'm a big believer in being strong enough for your sport. Like if you can deadlift like body weight or 1.5 times body weight, you're probably strong. You don't need to go stronger than that to pedal a bike fast. That said, most of the people, the masters athletes and the amateur athletes that I come with, they can't do even a body weight deadlift when they first start working with me. So we've got a lot of room to work with before that stops being as effective as it could be. Whereas the pros, doing more gym work isn't going to be as effective for them as it is for us. So they need that more, they really need that hyper specific stuff on the bike.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Many masters cyclists in particular, I think, say they're in Emporia for Unbound. If there's a stiff wind, they're in danger of breaking a femur potentially. Like they're that fragile.
Yeah.
And what do you make of, again, this is another super popular trend at the world tour level where suddenly everybody has to activate with bands prior to going on a bike ride. Do you think that's the most effective way for somebody to get ready to get on a bike?
Honestly, no, I don't. I mean, I've done the band stuff before. I've given it the old college try. I personally don't see a big improvement in my performance or my warm up by adding that. Like my warm up is, I'm going to get a more effective warm up by being more diligent on the bike and, doing my threshold efforts, doing my quick sprints. Again, I've never competed at the world tour level. Maybe for those guys, it does make sense. But, for the average amateur, like there's so many other things that we could and should be doing to improve our performance that, the band stuff, to me, that's like 1%, that's the marginal gain stuff that, it's fun. And it's like, we all want to emulate the pros. I mean, I do it too. I mean, I do stuff that the pros do that I know I shouldn't be doing. Like, I usually have a couple of 20-hour weeks in the summer and they utterly destroy me. Like it's not a benefit, but it's cool to tell my friend, yeah, I did 20 hours this week, but it really doesn't move the needle in terms of my fitness. It probably makes me worse actually, but it's still fun to do.
Yeah. I used to take a 24 kilogram kettlebell to my Bay Area super prestige cyclocross races my first season, and doing some swings was part of my warm-up. I like to think that it was more of an intimidation factor than it was actually an effective warm-up. And Art, I want to congratulate you on completing the Abandon Your Family 500. You're a treasured member of the Choose the Hard Way family and community, and we'll talk about this more offline. People have probably seen the hype. They know that I've launched this adult contemporary gravel initiative. It's targeted at the actual people who are going out there and competing in this sport. And there's some big things coming. We have the Shakeout Ride World Tour 2026. I can't quite reveal the details of that yet. And Art and I haven't talked about it, but there's a non-zero chance you might be seeing Art with me and some other stars in the constellation of gravel this summer. So stay tuned.
I would love that. And also, I wanted to throw my hat in the ring. I heard your podcast about the Tour de Tucson. Like, if you want someone to like go to the front and ride at 30 miles an hour for the first hour, I'm your Huckleberry.
Oh, wow.
I can do that for an hour.
Wow. This is very unexpected. Wow. Incredible. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I'm 215 pounds these days. I can haul ass on the flats for about an hour, but I'm not going to get you up any hills very fast.
As long as you don't do what Spencer did and sit on my wheel and then sprint past me at 1500 watts when we get caught out in the crosswinds, that'd be great. But hey, you know what? We all know that's what friends are for, and that's what you do to each other, unless you have a plan ahead of time.
Exactly. I love what you guys are doing on both your podcasts. They're always a highlight of the week when a new one comes out, and I can't believe I'm actually a part of it.
Thanks for listening. You can find me on Instagram at HardwayPod, and you can find Art at Wukar Fit and at WukarFit.com. The communication landscape has changed, and yesterday's media training just doesn't work. That's why I started One Real Voice, to provide the training and narrative development senior leaders need to thrive in the unscripted, open-ended communication formats like town halls, fireside chats, and podcasts that are now mission critical for their roles. I'm highly selective, and I limit the number of clients I work with so that we can go deep. But if you're ready to be great, DM me at HardwayPod or email hello@onerealvoice.com. Crypto curious? With over $1 trillion in transactions to date, blockchain.com is your trusted partner on your crypto journey. Go to blockchain.com to get started today. No experience required. Lauf is the Apple of bike design. They make elegant products that just work better than everything else. Check them out at laufcycles.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.